This episode of Decoding TV is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Decoding TV. I am David Chen.
And I am Roxana Hadadi.
Today on the podcast, we will be discussing Season 2, Episode 2 of The White Lotus, entitled Italian Dream. You can find more episodes of this podcast at podcast.decodingtv.com. You can email us at decodingtv@gmail.com and find us on YouTube and TikTok, as well as Twitter at Decoding TV. We will, of course, spoil this week's episode of The White Lotus, but we will not spoil any future week's episodes of the show. That includes anything on the Next Time on Preview or any other episodes we may or may not have seen. So, Roxana, let us get into it. Season 2, Episode 2 of The White Lotus, entitled Italian Dream. What were your overall thoughts on this episode?
Well, I think last time with episode 1, we talked about how that felt like a lot of table setting. It's like we met all the characters, they convened in Sicily. We sort of got a sense of what their personal and relationship dramas were. And I think we got more of that in this episode. And I'm feeling a tension where I like the additional details that we're getting, but I'm also sort of wondering if there's going to be a sort of secondary narrative discussion yet, or if we're going to stay in romantic relationship land for a little while, which is fine. But so far, that's primarily where we are. So
yeah, I mean,
I'm waiting for maybe something else.
I think that's a very nice way of saying not that much happened in this episode. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there was one big confrontation and kind of one revelation, really.
Yeah.
But other than that, we're kind of just hanging with these folks.
Yeah.
And I'm cool with that. You know, it's a beautiful place. These are beautiful people, and there are really interesting relationship dynamics at play. I don't know if I said that correctly, but yeah, I mean, this still feels like more table setting, feels like more build up. But I think I'm just accepting that it's, probably going to be a hang TV show for a lot of it. And I enjoy the hang. I like the hang, But yeah, is there going to be any kind of main overarching plot that drives through this season? Are we getting, last season there were these through lines that happened throughout the season. Is Tanya going to come to terms with her mother's death?
Right.
Is Shane ever going to get into the pineapple suite? Is Rachel going to leave Shane? Like, these are some bigger through line questions. And this season, it's not as clear what the through lines are. I mean, yes, the Tanya stuff is definitely still on my mind, but like, where are we going with all the stuff around Dominic and Bert and Alby? Where's all that going? It's kind of unclear at this point. Similarly, Harper, Ethan, Daphne, and Cam, who we spend a lot of time with in the show so far.
A lot of time.
It's like, what is the purpose of this? Now, again, that said, still really am enjoying the show, still enjoying the hang, and we'll talk about ways in which I think this show is quite good. But yeah, from a plot perspective, still not clear what's going on. So.
And I sort of miss the chaos of an Armand. Just like slowly sort of unraveling until he eventually was very quickly unraveling.
Right.
I feel like the seeds of that were sort of planted.
How does an Armand unravel? Very slowly and then very quickly.
That's what it's like it took a little while, and then he sort of like fell off a, figurative cliff.
Yeah.
So I'm missing that a little bit. And maybe we'll get that in future episodes. But for now, I'm sort of craving a little bit more chaos.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well, one response might be not chaotic enough for you, Roxana.
I know.
Because there is some chaos here.
All these people fighting is not enough chaos. And I'm like, it's not. No, I need more.
Okay, fair enough. I want to start by making an observation about the opening credits scene that we talked about last week. If you mentioned this, I apologize. But I don't think you did, but maybe you did. Okay, but I was watching episode 2 this morning before we recorded, and I realized that there's a fun little game you can play when you're watching the opening credits, which is that when the cast member's name appears on screen, the painting of a character or whatever is going on screen kind of matches with that character's role in the show.
Okay.
So anyway, that's just a fun little.
I did not notice.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe you'll watch it, Roxana, next time, and you'll be like, "You're out of your mind, David. That doesn't make any sense." But for me, when I'm watching, I'm like, "Oh, I can kind of see why that is kind of like Aubrey Plaza." And I'm just gonna.
Is there? Well, what? So what is the one that's sort of? Do you remember what they are, or an example? Of
I
one?
wish I had prepared a whole presentation for you, and perhaps next
Where
week.
are my slides?
Here's what I'm gonna say. Here's what I'm gonna say is, if you watch it next time and agree with me, then I will. Then we should do that. We should do the analyze. Like, I want you to text me after you watch the next episode and tell me, like, okay, David, you nailed it. Or, wow, Dave, I have no idea what you were talking about. But
see, now I'm very curious about if there is a cast member or crew member name or anything that corresponds with the woman having sex with the swan. Now I'm very curious.
I don't think so.
Oh, well, that's too bad. Missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, fun little game to play. Two games. There's a meta game of, is David Chen full of crap? That you can also play. So two games.
Has the new theme song unhinged him?
It's a good question to ask. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's dive into the episode. So we're going to start with the Harper and Ethan storyline, which is where the episode starts. Yeah. Ethan wakes up early and goes for a run by himself. And we see he wakes up way before Harper does, and he's super fit and getting a nice view of everything that's going on out in the world. And I just wanted to say, Roxana, I felt seen by this whole sequence. I wake up probably around 3 to 4 hours before my wife wakes up most days. And so I'm often just like on my own, living my life. And that's kind of what Ethan was doing. Yeah.
I said that. I reacted like that was actually shocking. But unfortunately, I also am the flip side of that scenario where my partner wakes up probably 2 to 3 to maybe sometimes 4 hours before. Yeah. So I don't know why I reacted. Oh, man, I pulled a Harper and I reacted with such judgment. Mm-hmm. And then it ended up being about me all along.
I'm feeling it, Roxana. Anyway, so Harper ends up at breakfast with Daphne and Cam. Mm-hmm. And because, she's there, it's like, hey, come on over. Let's have breakfast together, which is obviously something Harper really wants. Not. Anyway, they have a breakfast conversation. It's super clear they have nothing at all in common. And then Harper goes back to Ethan's room. Now, Ethan gets back to his room early, and he starts looking at pornography.
Yeah.
Roxana, I would never. I don't even know what website this guy was looking at. I would never look at any of these salacious materials. I would never, right?
Never.
No. But
if you
extremely hypothetically, right?
Sure.
An inconceivable scenario, extremely hypothetically, if I were to do so, I would never do so under the circumstances under which Ethan does so in this episode. I mean, you gotta, not be exposed metaphorically and literally in the way that he is in this episode. I don't think he played it correctly.
He's facing the doorway. Like, how did you not even go into the bathroom? Mm-hmm. Like, I
seriously,
have a lot of
the suite is
about
the
that.
Suite is huge. Okay,
yes.
I mean, there's tons of space. You don't need to be doing it in a place where your wife can walk in on you at any moment. Again, hypothetically speaking, I can't even relate to this whole mentality. Like, so I'm just saying, if I use the deepest recesses of my imagination to try to imagine what it might be like to be in Ethan, which I can barely comprehend. Mm-hmm. I would say, don't be out in the open like that. That's kind of would be my advice.
As we are riffing on this, I will say that in hindsight, this scene did sort of feel like it wasn't necessarily representative of people who have been together for the years that we are being told they've been together. Right? I guess I'm just surprised by his behavior and that she would be surprised. I think there's sort of a expositional quality to this dialogue that doesn't necessarily reflect the relationship at hand. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too critical, but something about it, I was like, would either of you really react like this?
Well, tell me what about you strikes, or so what about the scene strikes you as inauthentic?
I mean, it feels to me like Harper is very to the previous discussion of Ethan is like facing the door. I just something about it. It doesn't feel like the regular routine of what they're doing. So maybe the point here is that they're on vacation and they're beginning to act differently from their normal repetition. But something about Harper's shock was a little like, would you really be that surprised? And something about Ethan just doing it like open on the bed with no idea of when Harper would be back felt a little off.
I disagree.
Okay, that's,
completely. Or here's why. Here's why I disagree. And again, I just need to reemphasize that would never be able to comprehend what someone in this situation would be. So maybe because of that, I can only just wild stab in the dark guess at what the dynamics here are. But I would say that there are many reactions that someone in Harper's situation could have to this scenario. And I think a lot of people might feel insulted that their partner was viewing pornographic materials in open view of them. But I feel like they both handled it rather maturely. I'm not saying this is a healthy relationship. I'm not saying, because I think there's certainly elements that we see that are not super healthy. I'm just saying that they both seemed like quite mature about it. He's like, oh, I just needed to take care of it. And she's like, well, I can help you. And he's like, no, I'm good. Like, there's clearly like a lot that's like unsaid in that interaction, but they both treat each other civilly. There's not very much judgment explicitly in that. Okay, go ahead.
I completely read this differently.
All right. Well, again, since I have no idea what someone in this situation would be thinking, it's possible that I'm way off.
I think Harper is very judgmental. Like, I think her "Do you want help?" is incredibly half-hearted, which is not to say that she should be like super enthusiastic necessarily. But I didn't really read that she was being very mature about it. I think that she was potentially offended by it, which sure. And then I think she sort of signaled her disinterest by switching so quickly to talking about Daphne and Cam, which is really what she's obsessed with on this trip.
Yes.
Right? I mean, like, Harper has not talked about, like, finding things that they could do together, that her and Ethan could do together, or, hey, you're getting up early for your run. What if we did something together in the mornings? Like, there's no thought of, is there time that we can carve out for each other? There's just, I want to talk shit about these people. And apparently this is something she does regularly. So as much as the masturbation sequence was a little off for me, I thought the rhythm of this conversation, with Harper sort of being obsessed with comparing the couples to each other, and Ethan sort of bemused, okay, like, I'm used to this routine. I thought that felt like a very lived-in dynamic. That sort of signaled to me what their relationship is potentially like, and maybe the things that make Harper uncomfortable, and how Ethan is used to diffusing that tension. Like, I really liked that following conversation.
Interesting. Okay, well, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one, and I'm sure people will let us know who among us, whose side they're on, at decodingtv@gmail.com. Feel free to let us know what you thought of that scene.
Sure, all these people who also find this scene purely hypothetical. Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think so few people would really relate to anything going on that any people writing in would be completely hypothetical. But yeah, there is a kind of fun moment when he does say, like, hey, you're really judging these people, like, and he kind of calls her out on it.
Yeah.
And it's only people that she feels threatened by is what he says. Right. And there's a great edit in the episode where she says, I bet they're over there trashing me all the time too. And then it cuts to them, like Daphne and Cam, hanging out, having a blast. Really strong Don Draper, I don't think about you at all energy in that cut. And I do think we're seeing kind of two different psychological profiles of like people who are like there's some people who compare themselves to others and other people who like obviously Daphne and Cam have significant shortcomings, but they their neuroses or their shortcomings are in a completely different area than anything that Harper might be dealing with. So
and
anyway, yeah.
we do see, I mean, later on we'll get to this, we do see them discussing Harper, but so far they haven't discussed Ethan. Like, it feels like a lot of Harper's judgment of Daphne and Cam is about their relationship, and she's sort of making like all these calls on what they must be like as people and as a like collective entity. But I will say, to Cam's credit, he is sort of like, hey, Harper's the problem, but he doesn't make, he doesn't make this huge indictment of what's wrong with them. So yeah, I think we're seeing different ways that people consider themselves here when we're talking about the couples.
Yeah. So Daphne and Cam and Harper and Ethan hang out again. Later in the episode, we learn a little bit more about their backgrounds. Harper's like the wealth of Ethan is explicitly brought up, and like, hey, isn't life better now that you're wealthy and super rich? And I think this is a thing that a lot of, I'm going to just say, smart rich people do, is they downplay their wealth. In a way that Ethan does in the scene. And it reminds me of Bill Gates when he was talking about how he was a billionaire. And people ask like, hey, now that you're a billionaire, like what is life like? Is life vastly different? He's like, well, I used to go and eat I used to go to the restaurant and eat one cheeseburger. And now I guess I can have two cheeseburgers, like that's kind of how he put it. And it's like, it's kind of a way of making him like, I think, at the time when I heard it, I was like, oh, I guess he's really still very grounded. But like now looking back on it, I'm like, I think that's just a way that ultra millionaires or billionaires like try to seem relatable to people. And I don't know that Ethan strikes me as a particularly calculating person or anything like that, but I do think that he is socially proper and isn't going to say things like, yeah, like being rich is awesome. Like he's not gonna do that. And he does talk about how it's nice to be able to help Harper's family and things like that. Some of whom are living in Puerto Rico. So, but that they're not materialistic. Harper clarifies they're not materialistic. So the money doesn't really matter. Anyway, your thoughts on this sequence, Roxana?
I mean, okay, you're not materialistic, but like, aren't they now like multi-millionaires? Like, this scene again does a lot to make me think like, I sort of relate to where Harper is coming from and that she doesn't want to compare herself with these people. But the reality is like, you're closer to these people than you're closer to who you used to be, right? I mean, you're on this vacation together. You two could afford it. We learned she's helping her sister and her mom. I mean, there is this tension here between the person Harper does not want to be. And I think the show is doing a good job in sort of making her, I hate to say unlikable. I don't necessarily want to say that. Wow. But I think the show is doing a good job in giving her this dialogue that can be read either way, right? It can be read, to your point, like someone who is being, very thoughtful about their wealth and not trying to be like garish or off-putting about it. But at the same time, you can't change that you are wealthy. Like, you are part of that system. So almost in this way, I do almost find Harper a little bit like an Olivia from season 1.
I was literally about to bring that up. She's like Olivia V2, where she's she's a little bit older than Olivia, right?
Yeah, because I sort of thought that Portia was going to be our Olivia and Paula stand-in. But I think in Harper almost is like an Olivia and a Rachel, where she is now, she has proximity to this insane wealth that she was not used to, did not grow up with. And I think there's this attempt to reconcile, well, like, who am I now? Is this money going to change me?
Yeah.
That is, interesting. And I think, they like the money, right? Like, the money has opened up doors for them. But they're also seeing something in Daphne and Cam that at least Harper does not want to be.
Yeah, I think she has this deep anxiety, right, about wanting to
Yeah.
become, like, not wanting to become a quote unquote boring person,
Yeah.
or stuck up and snobbish, and positions herself as better than these other people, but like really fears becoming them, and there's a deep anxiety about that. It's kind of my read on it. Yeah.
And did we talk about last week where Harper described herself and Ethan as white passing?
I think we might have touched on it, but yeah, feel free to delve into it a little more, or reiterate.
Well, it's just something I keep thinking about, right? Because I think that she sees Daphne and Cam as these white, wealthy, to use her word, materialistic, narcissistic people who, as we talked about with episode 1, sort of have the ability to ignore the world around them. And so I think there's also this sense from Harper that if she were to become one of those people, it's because of how her and Ethan look. And so I'm curious if that comes up again or not. I mean, I don't think the White Lotus has done a ton of explicit racial discussion. I mean, we sort of had some implied disparity between like Belinda and Tanya and Paula and Olivia. And so I don't know how much Mike White wants to dig into what does it mean when a person of color becomes shockingly wealthy, and like what are the implications of that, which is something I'm trying to keep an eye on. I'm just sort of curious.
Yeah, I think the privilege of white people is acknowledged in this season.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't know that the show's going to delve that much into it.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that it's acknowledged, that there's something, when she says the words, I think it's Harper that says white passing, right?
Yeah.
In episode 1. And so I think, there's, I'll be curious to see if that conversation goes anywhere. So.
Yeah, like if it's not a throwaway line, but just sort of like a one line and like a done, or if it's brought up again. I mean, I don't think it would be brought up by Daphne and Cam, right? Like they don't necessarily seem self-aware enough to talk about that. But maybe I'm wrong, because Cam does obviously pick up on Harper not liking him. And he has that line when they're swimming together when he's like, I just want you to like us. And she's like, oh, I do. And it was the most
Cam doesn't seem super woke. Cam doesn't seem super woke to you, Roxana?
No, he does not. No.
He has self-awareness about her not liking him, and yet also grabs her ankle from the deeps. Which I have to imagine would make anyone uncomfortable. So
yeah.
And
he doesn't apologize for the nudity in that scene, right?
No.
He just apologizes for like saying dumb things. Yeah. So again, it's like, how
3 steps forward, 2 steps back with Cam. I think.
Yeah. How purposeful was him walking to that mirror?
Yeah. Unclear. Okay, so there is, so they go swimming, as we've discussed, then they have a meal together. And I just want to say, one of the things I really like about the show and this season is it really does a good job of capturing what this relationship dynamic is, and how, like, between these two couples, and how painful and uncomfortable and awkward and cringy it is, where like these people who basically have like nothing in common but are like trying to like each other, what happens when you put them all together. It's not like excruciating all the time or anything, but it's just like, okay, like, yeah, it's fine, but is this really the best way these people can be spending each other's time? I think the show does a great job of capturing that dynamic, which is a dynamic that I don't know about you, Roxana, but I have definitely witnessed, potentially on a rare occasion been part of. And I find it very true to life and very accurate. So that's like one of the delights of watching The White Lotus season 2 for me, is like witnessing that dynamic play out. But speaking of awkward and cringy, they're at dinner. They're talking about having kids, which, by the way, let me just give some advice to you if you're listening right now. Don't ask people about their kids' plans in a group setting. That is just a terrible idea. Like if you are one-on-one friends with if you're very close friends with someone and you're having a private conversation, yes, by all means, like check in on your friend. Do not ask people in a group setting. I feel like you don't know what people are going through. Maybe they're infertile and it's incredibly painful. Maybe, they've been trying and they can't, or one of them has a biological issue and but that's just life advice from the old Dave Chen here, that the White Lotus is making me think of. So, excuse me. Go ahead.
And to your point, it's how many other areas of conversation did they have to fail at to get to, hey, you guys gonna have kids? I mean, it really speaks to the possibility of they've either been sitting there in silence for a very long time, or they've just cycled through everything else. Maybe they talked about Ted Lasso again. I mean, I don't know. But the thing about that scene is, yes, it starts in this very uncomfortable, sort of cringy way, but I do think it gives us our best Daphne and Cam scene that actually makes you understand sort of how they feel about each other and love each other. And I think it gives Megan Fahey a really good opportunity to dig into who Daphne is. And it makes me think maybe a lot of this character is purposeful surface. I mean, I think there is depth there after this scene. And I think we're sort of getting a little bit like a little bit of a reveal of that with the story about her issues and her labor and their worry about their most recent child and all
so let's just be explicit, right? You're talking about the fact that Daphne reveals that she had an emergency C-section for her last child because they couldn't find the baby's heartbeat, and it's a very raw scene where we sense like a depth in Daphne that we didn't know about before, that there's might be many things that she's thoughtful about that we're unaware of, and that she has gone through like potential pain and tragedy in her life, right? So I do think it's really nicely done, yeah. But
and I think Harper is she seems like appropriately shocked by that.
Yeah. But also, I mean, Roxana, you're not even mentioning the most significant part of the scene, in my opinion, which is Ethan putting Harper on blast, kind of, at the dinner, where he's like, yeah, our sex schedules don't really line up. I wake up earlier than her and blah, blah, blah. And so that's why it's not really having kids, which is just like incredibly awkward thing to bring up at a dinner. Like, I don't know what is going. It felt to me like Ethan was being passive aggressive by bringing it up. It's like his way of letting Harper know he has a problem with it without just telling her he has a problem with it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it sinks back. I mean, it sinks back to the scene that you could not even imagine, in which I think she was being passive aggressive to him in offering to help, but not really offering to help, right? And I mean, even phrasing it, I think she even phrases it as help. And of course, like in any romantic relationship, I can sort of understand that not every sexual encounter is going to be some spontaneous, passionate, instantaneous thing. But I think the purpose of that scene and how it circles back here is like there is something off. Whether it's because they don't really want to have kids, Harper doesn't want to have a kid, and maybe that's why she's not pursuing so much of their sexual relationship. But yeah, there was some passive aggressiveness there that I think is sort of another crack in the foundation of what we were initially supposed to perceive as a successful, happy, supportive relationship.
Yeah, I really disagree with your read on that scene. I don't think she was being like passive aggressive. I think she was being like awkward. I think she was like she didn't really know what to do in that scenario. But I didn't sense like passive aggression behind her attitude in that scene. But maybe I am wrong about that.
I mean, okay. Well, let me ask: do you think there's a passive aggressive quality to the next scene, which is when they go back to their hotel room? And she sort of makes this offer. She's like, do you want to,
right? I
do
think
stuff to my body?
I think we might just have different diagnoses of the problem, right?
Okay.
You and me might have different. My diagnosis is just like, this is a relationship that works intellectually for both of them, but for which there is no real physical or romantic spark anymore. I think that is what the show is trying to depict for us. And, I think a lot of these kinds of relationships exist, and like we don't see them very much on TV. We see like loveless marriages that like are toxic and bad for both people, and we see like people really passionate about each other, but it's rare to see one that's like really in the gray area from my perspective. And that's kind of what my sense of it is. It's not like there's still like affection, there's still like caring and love, but that like physically the attraction is not there anymore. So that's what I'm positing. Yeah.
Do you not perceive any resentment from either side about that?
I think there is a little bit resentment, but I don't think it's on screen yet in a significant way. So,
okay, yeah, we're just gonna completely agree to disagree on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But hey, I haven't seen the rest of the episodes yet, so maybe this deep hidden resentments reveal themselves more explicitly, or maybe everyone listening to this podcast right now is screaming at their phone, wondering how I could be so off about this.
I think that your point about it being sort of like an intellectual, like intellectually that they still fit, they still align, they still probably have shared perspectives about the world. I think that's totally fair. And I think we're sort of seeing that. I think the difference here is just how we're construing the sexual dynamic.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, as you indicate, there is this final scene where she says, "Hey, I'm gonna try to be more fun," and kind of makes a half-hearted offer to have sex that is not reciprocated, really. So, yeah, I don't think it's a healthy relationship. I don't think it's like going great or anything like that. But I don't sense it as like these people. I don't see like, oh, these people are just passively aggressively sniping at each other.
No, and I don't think that's constant. I just think that we're beginning to see that more and more, right? I mean, we're seeing, well, I don't know if I want to say right because we don't necessarily agree, but I think we're seeing it more often than what I think is being alluded to in the past. But I also think all of the relationships we're seeing on the show, at least the romantic relationships, are in various states of being unwell.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Totally. Agreed.
Yeah, like Daphne and Cam aren't necessarily perfect either.
Well, let's talk about that. So Daphne and Cam, we get some exposure to them this episode. There's a scene early on that's very ominous where Cam yelling on the phone about his bag being lost, and he's like very angry. And Daphne remarks that sometimes, he's cool as a cucumber, and sometimes he'll just lose it. And it's like, okay, that's scary.
But don't you think she finds that funny? I mean, she says that it's kind of funny.
I don't think it doesn't strike me as someone who's fearful of Cam, right? It struck me as like, she's just, hey, it's hilarious that sometimes he'll fly into a rage.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, most of the scenes with Daphne and Cam are stuff we've already talked about. He kind of grabs her foot while they're swimming and is vague about needing them to like, needing Ethan and Harper to like Daphne and Cam. And there is a scene at dinner with where they talk about the birth and the C-section. But overall, other than their obliviousness to the world and kind of boorishness, to varying degrees, they seem like they're and Cam's fits of rage, they seem like they're a loving couple that doesn't have that many issues, at least between the two of them. Yeah. Yeah,
and what I'll say is they at least seem to have spent time together during the day.
Mm-hmm.
They go shopping, and Cam is trying on these ludicrously patterned Italian outfits, but it's at least a scene where we see them together, separate from Ethan and Harper, and we sort of get a sense of what that happy wife, happy life sort of dynamic looks like. Again, maybe it's facetious, right? Like maybe Harper is 100% right. Everything about this relationship is a performance. But they seem to genuinely enjoy each other's company in that scene in a way that we have not yet gotten for Harper and Ethan.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. She also says, they have a conversation towards the end where they talk about, Daphne says, like, I think some women cut off their husband's balls and then wonder why they're not attracted to them anymore, end quote.
Yeah.
It is this kind of, how do I put this very diplomatically? Like, I think that when I go online and I'm seeing what the quote unquote discourse is like, there are these kind of there's a lot of tension and competing visions of what masculinity should be, right?
Sure.
And I think like if I'm to be very simplistic about, or simplistic about it, it would be like there's a conflicting vision between like more traditional gender roles and like let's say more progressive vision of what a marriage or a relationship can be. And the traditional gender roles is like, the man should be a manly man and like go out and hunt for the food and,
Right.
and have large muscles and be able to be masculine and scream, extremely loudly with his buddies who are also screaming loudly at the mountain or whatever, that's the kind of vision of masculinity that I think a lot of like often conservative people have, and it's kind of conflicts with a perhaps more gentle, more in touch with one's feelings version of masculinity. I'm being extremely like sort
Very
of reductionist, very simplistic here. Like it's much more complicated than this, but I do think this is kind of what these relationships are kind of nodding towards. Is like, Cam and Daphne kind of believe in more traditional gender roles. Is my sense. What do you think of that, Roxana? Am I doing too reductionist here, or is this resonate with you?
No, I don't necessarily think you're being too reductionist. I mean, I think that I don't want to say necessarily we're saying we're projecting, but we do sort of know that Daphne is a stay-at-home mom. We know she misses her kids in a way that Cam doesn't really. I mean, I think it was in the preceding episode where she asked if they could FaceTime again, and Cam was like, no, it's too much. I don't want to think about our children. So I think, we are getting sort of that sense of she is stay at home. I also think in this episode they talk about their spending habits, and she says that she'll drunkenly just donate to a bunch of charities, which also seems like sort of a maternal quality that we're assigning to her character that fits within those sort of stereotypical roles. So I mean, I think that's fair. I just, again, don't know if we know enough about Ethan and Harper's home life to sort of understand that.
Mm-hmm. As a contrast to Daphne and Cam, right? Yeah. So we'll see. Any other thoughts on the Ethan, Harper, Daphne, Cam quadrangle?
No. I mean, I think, again, that's sort of the looming question of why does Cam need them both to like them? I think
like
that's
what's going on here. Like, what is Cam is going to pitch? Is going to pitch something at Ethan, presumably. Like, what is going on here? Like, we will probably find that out in a future episode, is my guess. So, all right, Roxana, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor and talk about our sponsor. This episode of Decoding TV is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. It's no surprise that here at the Decoding TV podcast, we absolutely love the idea of community. Over the course of the last decade, I personally have been really grateful to foster communities amongst movie lovers with my podcasts like the Filmcast, and also TV lovers who enjoy each other's company and can bond over our shared excitement about the biggest shows in the zeitgeist. And that's why I'm really proud and excited for Decoding TV to partner with McDonald's, because they truly care about fostering a sense of community. And one of the biggest ways they foster their wonderful sense of community is through their incredible crew members who work hard to truly make you feel right at home when you stop at a McDonald's. Whenever I go to McDonald's, we have one literally a mile away from my house. I'm always impressed by how fast and friendly their crew members are. And the result is I get my food quickly, I get it with a smile, I get it with really a friendly tone, and it's delicious, and it always provides me some comfort when I eat it. So it's been such a comfort to be able to have a local McDonald's over the past few years. Whether you have that one crew member who always remembers that you like your Big Mac with an extra pickle, or the one who always greets you in the drive-thru with a warm smile. Thank you, McDonald's crew members everywhere, for making our McDonald's visits even more special. McDonald's, I'm loving it. All right.
I love that. I'm sorry. Also, can you get a Big Mac with an extra pickle?
I think if you can ask for one. I think that's a possibility. So
I'm gonna try that next time.
With the app now, they like let you customize it in ways. I don't know if pickle is a specific thing, but like my wife wanted to order a McMuffin without the muffin part. and that's possible to do now in the app. So they really let you like customize these orders in a really cool way. Yeah,
I might need to explore.
Shout out for the McDonald's app
pickle,
too. Yeah,
the extra pickle is very appealing to me. So
nice.
Yeah, I need to poke around on the app, I guess.
Yeah, or just ask for it there. So anyway, thanks to McDonald's for sponsoring Decoding TV. Roxana, let's talk about the other storylines. Bert, Dominic, and Alby.
Emerging as my favorite, I think.
Really? Interesting. Tell me why. Why do you think it's your favorite?
Because I think F. Murray Abraham is giving an amazing performance. I mean, I just think that he is nailing so much about this character. Both sort of again, if we're talking about gender roles, both the sense of like, well, why wouldn't your wife be here? Why are they so mad at you?
Yeah.
I think he's very incredulous in a way that is working for me. And I also think that he's giving some very hilarious facial expressions. I mean, we'll talk about this scene later on, but when he hears what's going on in Dom's room, he has this look that's just like, what is he doing? I told him to keep it together, and he's not keeping it together. So I think he's doing a good sense of this generational, I don't want to say, I mean, again, we've said privilege a lot here, but this sort of generational privilege of, I'm an older man, and therefore, like, I think that men should just, like, do whatever, and it's fine as long as you keep it secret. I guess I'm laughing at it because it is, like, sort of depressing, but he's just playing it in a way that is so pitch perfect.
He's very matter-of-fact about it.
Yes.
And, I'm liking this storyline because basically we get to see kind of the generational damage that philandering can do throughout, and its impact on three separate individuals, basically, right? And how
normalizing of it, really, not just the philandering, but like of course I would do this. Why wouldn't I do this?
And how it kind of plays out for three different individuals, and it obviously resonates with them in different ways, you know. There was no, my parents are extremely conservative Christian, but so there's no philandering. But I did, I had a talk with my brother recently where we love our parents, but our parents can do things that give us complexes about certain things. And I was talking with my brother yesterday about how some of the ways that our parents raised us affected me in a way that differently than it affected him. And it's just like,
of course,
you get to kind of see how it resonates over the years. And this is the storyline that kind of gives us a closest sense of that. Oh, you see how Dominic could have come from Bert, and then you see how Alby, given that he's probably Gen Z, maybe Gen Z millennial border, probably Gen Z.
I think Gen Z.
Yeah, Gen Z. But you like how him in a Gen Z environment is much more reasonable and treats women with much more respect. And so far.
Does he?
So far.
Does he? I mean, we'll talk about
certainly
that.
the least objectionable. Okay. You disagree, but I don't think we have any reason to see him. I mean, he's not the most suave guy, but I think he's least disrespectful, I guess, is kind of what I would say. So
I think someone who tells you that they're a nice guy and who tells you that they're being victimized for being a nice guy.
Yeah,
I think that's sort of automatically, I think, a little bit of a warning for us about where this character could go. But something that I really liked about season 1 was the difference between Olivia and her younger brother. And I thought that storyline, the Olivia and Quinn, right? Quinn was her younger brother's name.
Yeah.
I think that storyline was really well done, to your point of how do people grow up in the same house and just become completely different people?
Yeah.
What is the nature-nurture line? And we're really getting that with the three of them. So this storyline starts with what? Dom wakes up in bed with Lucia's underwear.
Right. And I'll just say, before we move on, I'll just say, hey, Alby could turn out to be massive incel,
Sure.
And I agree that's very incel type language of being a nice, which he does use in the episode. But so far I'm the least concerned about him, but we'll see. I have an open mind about all these characters. So anyway,
I just think the way that Mike White writes, every line matters, right? So I think that whole,
when he's at dinner with Portia is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, his conversation with Portia, I think, is important, but we'll get there. Yeah, I mean, that's toward the end of the episode. Let's like back it up.
Yeah, so there is a scene where Dom wakes up, finds underwear in his bed, and then they all have breakfast, and Portia's there. Now, Portia protests in this episode, Roxana. She says, "What? Well, I was going to say later on. She's like, she catches Jennifer Coolidge's eye a bunch of times, and Jennifer, and actually, I think she catches Greg, right? Is that his name?
I think so.
Yeah, Greg. Greg sees her there. Like she definitely sees her, and she's like, "Well, what does she expect me to do? Like, I have to eat." And here's the thing, Roxana. Look, I agree that being a personal assistant is a very dehumanizing job, and
sure.
And I agree it's not reasonable to expect them to stay in their room all the time. But 5-star hotels have room service. You know, you could technically. I'm not saying Tanya's reasonable. I'm just saying that it is possible for someone to physically survive staying in a room all week. So
if I wanted to be very uncharitable, I would say that, Portia sees Alby as an opportunity, right? I mean, I think that he is sort of non-threatening to her because he's there with his father and his grandfather. And I think when they invite her to go, it's like, oh, of course I'll go, right? I mean, I think Portia is taking the advice of, I think it was her sister in episode 1, who was like, have a good time.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't want to say that's nefarious, but I agree with you. Like, it's not like the resort is bad. She could just hang out at the pool.
Yeah, she could hang. She probably has a balcony in her room. Right, exactly. It's anyway. I'm not saying Tanya's reasonable. She's clearly not reasonable. I'm just saying that I think I've said what I had to say, so I'm not gonna. Let's move on. So anyway, they meet at breakfast, right? Bert, Dominic, and Alby meet at breakfast, and it's nice when you make a cool connection with someone while you're on vacation. You'd never meet this person, but and so they invite her to go along because they're going on this pilgrimage, and Bert is very bothered that Dominic's wife and daughter are not there, and he asks a lot of uncomfortable questions about it. But then there's a scene with Dominic and these locals. But before we get to that, any other thoughts on the breakfast stuff and going on the trip?
No, I mean, I think that's all fine. I will just say that is the hike scene after the locals?
It's right afterwards, because they're about to go off, and then Dominic's like, "Hey, I got to make a call real quick," and then he introduces the locals to the hotel manager, Valentina. I love that scene.
It's a great scene.
Because it's great because, first of all, you can tell Valentina's just trying to put a stop to this however she can. She's throwing up barriers left and right to make this work or to make this not work. But I also like that the show acknowledges that a lot of the hospitality business and the sex worker business are they both have a symbiotic relationship, I think. They both benefit from the other party. And that's what Lucia and Mia, Lucia mostly acknowledges, hey, you're making money off of this too. I'm making money off of it. Can't we both just be business people and accept each other's presence? But I don't think Valentina is quite as easily swayed. So
no. Yeah, Lucia goes with the customer is always right for both of our respective industries sort of line of questioning. But yeah, that's a great scene. I mean, we haven't gotten, again, Valentina is not to the level of Armand, I think, narratively, but this scene felt very of a season 1 rhythm of the resort staff is doing everything they can to sort of maintain this level of hoity-toityness. And the actresses who play Lucia and Mia are great because they are really gleeful in that scene, barely containing how happy they are to gain access. So it's a good tone, I think.
Yeah, and we do see Valentina being pretty rude to all of her employees. We do see she's very brusque, and also, charitable way of looking at it is that she has high standards. Uncharitable way is she's kind of a jerk.
Also, sure.
Yeah. So, But yeah, I thought that was a great scene. And then, of course, Lucia and Mia go off. And, well, we'll talk about them a little bit later. Let's finish up with the Bert, Dominic, and Alby stuff. So they go. They go to. Is it like the Coliseum or something like that? I don't.
Something like a theater.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the Coliseum or
whatever it was. It's
theater
beautiful.
nearby.
You know. And I mean, the whole show is incredibly beautiful this season. Amazing cinematography and vistas and views. And yeah, they have more dialogue about whether Dom should try to get back with his ex-wife, and Bert's insistent that he should. And you know, did you really do anything that badly? And so on and so forth. There is a story about Hades and Persephone. What did you make of that? Hades raped Persephone in Sicily. Really, this guy Bert, he really knows how to charm the guests with his fun stories, huh?
Bert is digging up the classics. Bert just wants to give a history lesson. I thought this was great. I mean, again, if we're talking about dialogue that is clearly purposeful, I think whatever you've done can't be as bad as Hades and the raping. I think we're supposed to file away as something potentially with Dom. And I mean, you raised a possibility for Dom after season 1, which is, are we seeing a Me Too storyline? And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the show would get that explicit, but I think we are sort of maybe getting another subtle examination of a powerful position and what that affords you. And I
with the Hades mention, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that Dom's sort of song and dance with Valentina about Lucia and Mia almost felt not rehearsed, but maybe familiar. So maybe there is something else that we're supposed to be intuiting about like who Dom is and potentially what his addictions and compulsions have done. It feels like a lot of talking around stuff is happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Hades and Persephone scene, I did gasp when Bert said that. And again, to your point, F. Murray Abraham is just so matter-of-fact about it.
Yeah.
That it's this great sort of contradictory effect of this shocking story that he's just recounting very casually.
Indeed. They have dinner later on. Dominic and Bert have dinner themselves. Alby and Portia go off on their own and have dinner separately. But Dom is basically given a hard time because he wasn't careful enough. You know, like you should have been more careful. And then Dominic's like, well, you weren't exactly super careful either. So like, I don't know what you're talking about, you know? And and you get a sense that these guys are just kind of not great guys, you know, if I may use an understatement.
Maybe not the best guys.
Maybe not the best role models for Alby.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Alby and Portia have dinner together, and you, I guess, sense some sinister undertones from this conversation.
Well, no, I don't think it's sinister in the way that I don't think Alby is like gonna attack her. But I think Alby, is so intent on not being like his father and his grandfather. But I don't, how to phrase this? Okay. I think in episode 1, we talked about how it seemed like Harper is defining herself based on what she's not, right? Like she's not like Daphne and Cam. So therefore she must be not materialistic. She must be morally good, all of that stuff. I think, and so in that way, I think she sort of lacks a defining personality of her own because she's just considering herself in terms of what she doesn't want to be. I think Alby is the same way. He so doesn't want to be like his father and his grandfather that I think what's actually there is this sort of like presumptive nice guy quality. And he seems very nice. I don't want to say that he seems, you know, like, again, like it's facetious. But at the end when he's like, you know, girls say they want a nice guy.
Yeah, he says girls. You wrote the quote in the notes. Girls always complain that guys aren't nice, but then if they find a nice guy, they aren't always interested. I just don't want to be I just don't want to be like my dad. I refuse to have a bad relationship with women. End quote. Right. That's kind of what he says. So,
but you need to be something more than nice, right? Like you need to have some other personality trait. And sometimes people just aren't attracted to you, even if you are nice. Niceness is not. You know, the end all be all. So yeah, so they have a dinner together. And I think through that dinner, you get some more explanation about how Alby views himself. He sees himself as the peacemaker between his parents. And then we also get some stuff that Portia says about Tanya, right? Like, because they see Tanya and Greg. I think Portia also drops some Tanya knowledge on us that we did not know before.
Yeah. Yeah. Like information about the fact that like why Tanya is like might be troubled basically in certain ways, right? So
and that she had to sign an NDA.
Yeah.
So
they stop hanging out. He walks her to her door, asks if he can kiss her. She says yes. It's awkward. It's not like the super most loving thing, but he's up for like hanging out again, and we'll see if that happens.
I mean, her response is sure. Her response is not like, yeah, I'm super excited. Her response is like a shrugging, okay, I don't have any other options.
I chalked it up to awkwardness, Roxana, but that's fair. It's fair. I didn't chalk it up to like, I didn't chalk it. The way you're describing it almost sounds like resignation, but that's not the sense I got from her.
I 100% read it as resignation.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad we have different perspectives on this. Yeah. Anyway, the other thing we should mention about Dominic and Bert is that later Dominic has a conversation with Lucia. Lucia shows up as was planned. She's already spent quite a bit of money. Like Dom had said to her, "Hey, please don't go wild. Like, have some drinks, have some food, but don't go wild." She's like bought dresses and got drinks, and I think she probably spent a little bit more. It didn't seem like wildly unreasonable, but it was definitely probably more than Dom thought. Anyway, he says, "Hey, I don't want to do this tonight because I am struggling with sex addiction, and let's not, I don't want to have this temptation." And Lucia and Mia are able to overcome his reservations.
Yeah.
And they kind of have a wild night that Bert hears through the wall a little bit, right? And that's kind of where that plot line ends. So
are the White Lotus walls really so thin?
I will say that I have on occasion stayed in a luxury hotel, and very often, you can hear what people are doing through the walls. It's not quite as bad as what you'd hear, like what you see in the show. But like, sure. I basically what I'm trying to say is I don't trust a hotel wall. Okay, that's kind of what I'm trying to say. I don't trust a hotel wall, basically ever. And that's another thing that really bothered me too is Ethan and Harper like talking openly about Cam and Daphne, like while they're in the next room. My wife would be so upset if I was talking about like our suite mates or whatever, because largely because my voice is very loud and it carries Roxana, and so she'd be mortified that like the possibility. But anyway, I'm just saying, wow, talking in full voice about the people you're hanging out with, not a good idea. Don't.
Again, go into the bathroom. The bathroom seems really nice. Why is no one using the bathroom?
I think that's basically the takeaway of this episode is that going into the bathroom would have solved a lot of problems, or potential problems. Any thoughts on the Dominic like hanging out with these women? Like it was such a weird vibe, I thought.
Was it weird? I mean, I think it's sort of, I don't know if it's weird. I mean, I think we're sort of getting the sense that Dom doesn't actually want to change, right? I mean, it was very easy for the two of them to offer him a threesome and talk their way into his room.
Yeah.
Lucia is very confident about being his girlfriend for the week.
Yeah.
I don't think we're really seeing Dom put up a lot of resistance or actively attempt to change. So
yeah. Yeah. When I say weird, I think it was just, it felt like it was like drug fueled almost, like the way it was shot. Basically.
Okay. Did it feel the same way to you as the sex scene at the end of the first episode?
No. It felt more like frenetic and like, because just the combination of edits and camera angle, like the camera angle is like weird, like tilting and off.
Because we're in the water too.
Yeah, we're in the water.
I couldn't tell if that was like a big bathtub or like a mini pool in the suite or whatever.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, that felt it's different from she's joining him on a chair.
Right.
It's now you're adding a third party. And
you're adding a third party and putting water in the mix, who knows what could happen.
Wild.
Yeah. All right. I think you make a great observation. Dom is losing it. He's out of control. So
not keeping it tight.
Indeed. Okay. We've basically already talked about Portia, right? I don't know if there's anything else you want to mention about Portia and Lucia and Mia before we get to Tanya and Greg.
I think that Mia performing is a big deal. I mean, Mia has, from the first episode, talked about wanting to be a singer. And I think there is this, I think she was very offended by what Giuseppe did in episode 1 and, throwing her drink in his face and everything when he assumed that she was a prostitute. So I think in this episode, we're getting a greater sense of who she wants to be. She wants to be a singer. She's not bad. She has a good voice, and I think she sort of shocks Giuseppe by being good. So I think that's something to watch. Like, Lucia is clearly banking on Dom for this week. But I think Mia has her eye on Giuseppe in sort of a different way, like I'll show you what I'm made of kind of way.
And I think she's like, as you said, I think she's legitimately good at singing, and it was cool to hear. Cool to hear.
Yeah.
So, all right, Tanya and Greg.
Yeah. Oh God, Tanya and Greg.
Tanya wants the perfect day, right? And she lays out all the things that she wants, and she wants to ride in a Vespa and go to this place and take pictures and dress up in a certain way. And Jennifer Coolidge is just a delightful actor. The part about posing for the photos is great. When she's on the Vespa with Greg, she's like choking him by accident, but then like bugs are flying in her, and it's like in her mouth, and it's like some really amazing physical acting that I think Jennifer Coolidge is doing, where she's like coughing so intensely on the bike. It's really, really funny. I think she remains a delight in the show.
And even before they really get going on the Vespa, the sort of rhythm of Greg failing to drive it at first.
Yeah.
That I think that sort of failed attempt was very funny as well. We also get Valentina's very cruel description of Tanya as Peppa Pig.
Yeah, she's like, who am I dressing up as? And Valentina says Peppa Pig, which is just like, I mean, that is almost like, I don't even believe that anymore. No. What I mean by that is that's like so. Even if you weren't the manager of a top tier resort, like that would be I have to imagine across cultures, it is not acceptable to compare someone to a pig.
Right.
I'll
be honest.
Yeah.
I would have bought it if it was Miss Piggy.
Yeah.
If she said Miss Piggy, I could see that, because Miss Piggy
she's like a glamorous,
glamorous. Yeah. Glamorous. But Peppa Pig, I was like, isn't Peppa Pig a children's character? Like, why would Valentina make that reference? So that was a moment where I was like, I don't know.
You're really hitting this point that Valentina is really awkward, like a little too hard, I think, show.
Yeah. And mean. Like, just sort of mean.
Yeah. Not quite a well-balanced Valentina depiction yet, I think. So,
no, not really. No.
Anyway.
We get these, again, to your point about the beautiful cinematography, as Greg and Tanya are like winding around like the mountain roads, looking out over how beautiful this landscape is. I mean, all of that is done so well. And again, a sort of an homage to the Italian cinema that Tanya wants to emulate during this perfect day.
Yes. Well said. So anyway, later on they have dinner, and then Greg reveals that he actually needs to end the vacation early.
Which vacation that he said was romantic, and he was so angry that Portia was there, and
right. And Jennifer Coolidge is like, "Thank God I kept my personal assistant around." So that gave me a little bit of heart palpitations, because I'm like, oh, she's gonna bring Portia back into the mix somehow, and like that's not gonna be good, I think. But Greg is like, I wanted to give you a perfect day because I got to cut the vacation off early, and then comments that it's because she made him sign a prenup, and really, like, a lot of the tensions spill out where he's like, you discard people left and right, you're capricious, you're fickle, like, I can't predict what you're going to do, so I need to keep my job. And honestly, I'm very sympathetic with Greg in that moment, In
that moment, yes. Yeah. I mean, again, it's one of those things where it's like, I think you could have said this differently. Maybe you could have been kinder. But Tanya, I mean, putting aside all the the macaron fight and the panna cotta dig, she she is indecisive and fickle and all of those things. I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah.
I just think there's a cruelty to what he says. And then when we find out by the end of this storyline,
Well,
what else is happening with Greg?
It felt to me like, hey, this is kind of what, obviously the show has to do with rich people all the time. But it's basically like Rachel and Shane from last season, like fast forward them to the end and mix up the dynamics a little bit, and this is kind of like what it might be like, where one person feels like, oh, I need to keep doing my own thing so that if this relationship fails, I have something to hang on. So I'm not like literally out on the street, right? Mm-hmm. And that's this is not just a dynamic between Tanya and Greg. This is something that happens like very often where there's like a wealth imbalance in a relationship like this.
Mm-hmm.
But you really...
Did you say this last episode where you brought up contempt?
Yes, that was me.
You talked about this. There's so much contempt in this conversation from Greg to Tanya that it's very uncomfortable to watch. I mean, the Hades and Persephone stuff with Bert sort of made me laugh because it was so unexpected. But this whole scene was just very cringy. And as much as Tanya is sort of awful, I don't know if anybody necessarily needs to be talked to by someone like that. I agree. Like you shouldn't be contemptful to your partner. But in this scene, I was very sympathetic to Greg because it's like, he probably feels trapped. Like her quirks, which were originally like super fun and interesting, probably have worn thin over time. And now now you got to deal with the reality of actually living with this person. But then the final scene turned it all around for me because he's cutting off the vacation, not for work, but to go to somebody that he's having an affair with, or so we are led to believe in this episode. Yes. You're right. We are led to believe that. I mean, he calls Tanya. So basically, what happens here, right, is that Tanya wakes up in bed alone. Yeah. She walks through the suite trying to find Greg. She sees. She has a vision of the volcano going off near them, by the way. Yes. Which is also something that's seen in the opening credits, FYI. Right. Like the painting is alive with the volcano. Yeah. Yeah. So exactly. Anyway, go ahead. You were saying? Yeah. So she wakes up from this or whatever, or it's just, I don't know. It's interesting that both the Moor's heads and the volcano are related to Tanya. But moving on past from that, she walks out, she sees him on the balcony. Now, I don't think that she hears the conversation. I don't think we're led to believe that happens. But then we go out onto the balcony and we hear Greg's side of the conversation with whomever. I thought the implication was that she heard it, by the way. But really? But, yeah. Oh, I didn't think that at all. All right. Well, anyway, go ahead. Finish what you're saying. I didn't think that. But so he calls Tanya clueless, and he says to the person he's speaking with, I love you too. I look forward to it. So I thought affair. Definitely. Yeah, or it's like I'll see you tomorrow, which is like when he's leaving, right? So it's like, he's leaving to go see this person, and he says, I love you. Now, maybe it's lying about work. Well, yeah, he's lying about work, certainly. Yeah. But maybe it's a big misunderstanding, Roxana. Maybe Greg is going he loves Bob, his boss. Loves Bob. I'll see you tomorrow, man. Bye. You just made me choke just now. That was very funny. Or maybe it's like his mom or something like that. Yeah. And if he loves Bob, good for him. That's fine. Absolutely. But the only reason I thought that we didn't hear that is I think at the end we cut back to Tanya. Yes. And isn't it quiet? Well, he had already wrapped up his conversation by that point, or he had walked somewhere else. So I think but I agree. I would say that it was ambiguous. But that my interpretation of the ambiguous situation was that she heard it. So, do you think Tanya would not react if she had heard it? Well, I think that in general she would react, but we did have that earlier conversation where they already clearly had a pretty big falling out at dinner. So maybe she's processing, who knows? Yeah. Who knows? We'll find out next episode. So, we will. Yeah. Until then, I think that's it for this episode. Any other random associated thoughts of this episode, or shall we wrap it up there, Roxana? I think that sounds good. Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I'm glad you brought up the volcano. Yeah. Because I do think the first season of the White Lotus so often used the waves as this sort of ominous, foreboding element, and we're getting that as well. But I like the volcano. I like the Moor's Head. I think we're adding some atmospheric touches that I am interested in continuing to track.
The only other thing I want to mention is I think the show continues to be really funny with the hints of who is dead. First of all, like no cutting to the future storyline again this episode. I like that they're kind of. It's probably going to be a reveal like last season where we find out in the last like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Of the final episode who's dead. But there's a handful of like very funny lines along those lines. Like, I think Cameron, like they're talking about Cameron losing his temper earlier. And Daphne's like, oh yeah, all of a sudden he'll just lose it. And then Cameron says, incompetence, like these people are so incompetent, makes me homicidal.
Yes.
And it's like,
yes.
Really, Cam?
Yes.
Are you actually homicidal? You know,
right.
That's the question. Are you going to get homicidal? Let's see. That is basically it. I am curious. The only other thing I would say is I'm curious, like, what perspective the show is going to take on the concept of sexual addiction, which is what Dom says he's suffering from. Like, is sexual addiction even a legitimate thing to suffer from? You know, like, or is it just like this guy is extremely horny and he has resources? You know, I'm
or
curious.
Is it that sexual addiction is a real thing, but it's not Dom's scenario and it's just a narcissist?
Right,
yeah.
exactly. You know, so I'm kind of curious, like where the whole sex addiction storyline is going. Still don't think we have enough information on that. But those are some of my thoughts, and I got to the rest of them during the rest of our recap. So I think we can probably wrap it up there.
I think so.
Roxana Hadadi, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
You can find me at Vulture, and you can find me on Twitter.
And we'll leave a link to Roxana's work in the show notes. Find more episodes of this podcast at podcast.decodingtv.com. Email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of our interpretations of this episode. And find us on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter at Decoding TV. She is Roxana Hadadi. I am David Chen. You're listening to Decoding TV. We'll be back next week with our recap and review of Season 2, Episode 3 of The White Lotus. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.